Um, First item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you would join me in that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I see everybody's lips have stopped moving. Roll call. Misty Atkins.
Can't hear you when you turn away from the camera.
Okay. Michael Coltrane. Brian Mace.
Present.
Lavoy Hurley. Barbara Tillman. White. Pickle, present. Arthur Kirshen.
Present.
Mary Preble.
Present.
Mary Martinson.
Present.
Okay, we have 9 individuals on the committee. We have 4 present. We require a quorum, or 5 to have a quorum. We currently do not meet the quorum requirements, therefore we can take no action. The meeting at this point in time is for information only. The first item on the agenda that we could do anything with at all is legislative review, and mostly what I'm looking for here, I'm the one that put this item on the agenda, is a volunteer to keep track of what's going on in Phoenix on any bills that are relevant to elections. It does require a little bit of a time commitment. If anybody would have any interest in doing that, please let me know, and we will make it a regular agenda item. I will attempt to do it if I don't find anybody else that's willing to do it, but obviously we can't elect officers, so that's something won't happen, and we cannot approve the meeting summary. So, Mary, Gabby, if you want to do your presentation, we may schedule it again next month since we can't do anything to take any action, but I hear people popping on and off. I don't know if we've had anybody else show up. I don't see anybody else on the screen. And I think we have room for other people to show up. So, Gabby and Mary, at this point in time, I'll turn it over to you. You can be as brief or as lengthy as you'd like to be.
Well, we have a presentation and we'd like to go through it for those that are here, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Okay, we will begin that.
Okay, well, good morning, Elections Integrity Commission. Oh, I should probably actually. I'm Gabriela Cáceres-Kelly, the Pima County Recorder.
I'm Mary Martinson, the Interim Elections Director.
We are presenting a more secure and accessible voting in Pima County, a presentation about poll books and vote centers. This is a joint presentation by the Pima County Elections Department and Pima County Recorder's Office.
Precinct voting. Pima County currently uses precinct-based voting on election day where voters are required to vote at their assigned polling place in order for their vote to be counted. During the 2020 primary and general election, Pima County operated approximately 240 polling places.
A vote center model means that any Pima County voter could vote at any of the vote centers open on election day. It's our contention that Pima County would benefit from moving to a vote center model.
Election administration in Pima County. In Pima County, the Recorder's Office administers early voting and voter registration. The Recorder's Office maintains the voter database for all registered voters in Pima County. The Elections Department administers election day voting and tabulation.
Vote center history. Vote centers were first established in Larimer County, Colorado in the mid-1980s. Since then, vote centers have been used in 18 states for Election Day voting, including Arizona.
Arizona Revised Statute 16-411B4 allows the County Board of Supervisors to authorize the use of vote centers in place of polling places.
Vote centers have been in Arizona for 10 years. Yavapai County was the first in Arizona to adopt a vote center model in 2012. Since then, 10 other counties in Arizona have adopted some form of vote center model. In your packet, you can see the letters from Yavapai and Cochise County elections directors about the benefits that they've seen in their counties.
Vote center model has been tested in Arizona. Pima County would be joining 11 other counties in Arizona that already utilize some form of vote center model. The only ones not using a vote center model is Pima, Apache, Mojave, and Pinal.
The background of this project, in 2014, the Pima County Elections Department did a pilot with Knowing, a maker of poll pad technology. The Elections Department was pleased with the technology. All Arizona counties except Pima County use e-poll books for checking in voters. The poll pad performed very well. However, the previous administration of the Pima County Recorder's Office was not comfortable with the security of the technology at that time.
In January of 2021, Recorder Gabriela Casares Kelly took office and discussion began with the Elections Department to collaborate on a voting-related projects, including revisiting the use of e-poll books in vote centers.
Since February of 2021, the Recorder's Office and the Elections Department have been meeting several times a month to explore the feasibility of e-poll books and a vote center model, and we've been having a little fun on the way.
In November of 2021, we performed a pilot for the small veiled bond override election administered by the Recorder's Office. The technology performed well. The team then began exploring a sole source contract with 10X.
So why vote centers? Following is the justification that we believe will strongly make the case for moving to vote centers.
Early voting is increasing. The blue bar shows voter registration in Pima County, and the numbers are measured on the left axis. In 2020, there were just under 633,000 registered voters at the time of the election. The orange line represents the trend of early voting, and the numbers are measured on the right axis. We wanted to show them comparatively, but you have the table with the data in your supplemental package.
Voting at polls is declining. Across the country, voting at polls on Election Day is declining as more states institute early voting, which is more accessible. Again, the blue bars show voter registration in Pima County, and the orange line represents the downward trend of Election Day voting at the polls.
One of the greatest benefits to moving to vote centers is the near elimination of provisional ballots.
Provisional ballots in 2020, here in Pima County, there were 18,687 provisional ballots cast, which meant that 28% of our voters had to cast a provisional ballot. 12,220 people were issued an early ballot and then voted at a polling location, and 656 votes were disqualified due to voting at the wrong polling place. Voter confidence is affected by voting provisional, and it costs Pima County over $100,000 just to process the provisional ballots.
Vote center means less provisional ballots. We estimate an 83% decrease in provisional ballots with a vote center model. Maricopa County had 4 times as many voters in 2020, and we had more provisional ballots.
Processing time after the election is over will be significantly shorter. In most years, processing provisional ballots take close to or at the deadline of 10 days after the election. Pima County is often one of the last counties to report election results in the state. Pima County would save over $100,000 alone in the processing of provisional ballots, And some voters are concerned when they are told that they have to vote provisional. Voters won't be concerned about their vote not counting.
Another great benefit is more automated check-in process at the polls.
The current process for manual check-in requires multiple steps, logs, forms, and is susceptible to human error. Mistakes can create issues for voters and end-of-day audits.
The manual check-in process. They first have to search in a roster, then they have to fill out a general voter ID slip, which means they have to enter the register number, they have to initial, they have to list what the situation is, they have to list the ballot stripe color, and all that information is double-checked by a roster judge. Then you have to find the voter's name in the signature roster. They have to mark the signature roster, have the voter sign. They have to manually write an E if the voter was issued an early ballot, and they get that either by mail or at an early voting site. Creating an entry in a poll list, which is a 4-part carbon book that they need to press very hard to get it all the way through 4 copies, and they have to write every person's name and register number that vote at the polling place. And finally, if they have to vote a provisional ballot, the voter and the poll worker has to fill out the voter provisional envelope.
Meanwhile, the e-poll book check-in is very simple, and we have a little video here to show you the easy process.
Check-in with the e-poll book. The first option for check-in is the most widely used. If a person has a scannable ID card like a driver's license, the poll pad automatically pulls up the voter. The voter signs the poll pad and they are issued a ballot voucher via a thermal printer.
If the person does not have a scannable form of identification, the poll worker types 3 or more letters into the name fields.
Then the voter reads the voter oath and signs.
Once the voter is checked in, the e-poll book application will send their information to a ballot printer that will print a ballot specific to the precinct in which the voter lives. The recorder's office has been using ballot on-demand printers to print ballots for early voting with great success since 2017.
The benefits of ballot on demand. Ballots are only printed as someone checks in. Someone being able to print a stack of ballots and stuff the box is impossible. It eliminates the need to print ballots for each voting location ahead of time. The ballot style is printed for each voter, therefore there are no blank ballots at the polls or unvoted ballots after the election.
Issues with staffing. The average age of a poll worker is around 60 years old. 27% are over 71 years old. 70% of jurisdiction had a hard time recruiting poll workers in 2018, and 2020 was even more difficult. For election staff, they are more and more fatigued with outdated systems and more often are dealing with disgruntled voters, not to mention the added challenge of our older poll workers being especially vulnerable during the global pandemic.
Benefits of automated election day reporting. No need to process addendums. Paper rosters are compiled ahead of Election Day and do not reflect all requests for early ballots. This means that an additional addendum to the roster must be produced after 5 p.m. on the night before the election. Poll workers must use this addendum to update their rosters by manually looking up every early voter and marking an E next to their names. This process takes about 30 minutes on election morning. E-poll books eliminate the need for addendums by providing up-to-the-minute information. In addition, on Election Day, up-to-the-minute lists of who has voted would be available for campaigns, political parties, and the press. The process to close out Election Day will also be automated with reporting and audit tools.
To recap the benefits of the vote center model, the vote center model is faster, more convenient, and less confusing for voters. People can vote at any polling location, so no more turning away voters for being at the wrong location. Check-in time will go from 3 minutes to 30 seconds. It's more secure. It eliminates the possibility that someone could vote twice. A voter is automatically checked in once and cannot vote again. The human error of marking the wrong line for a voter is eliminated. Ballots are only printed as someone checks in. Someone being able to print a stack of ballots and stuff the box is literally impossible. And it's more accurate. Check-in is automated. The system will bring up the exact voter, and it eliminates people signing on the wrong lines.
Benefits recap. Time savings for all processes. Roster preparation. Rosters per location. They're printed 3 or 4 between 700 and 900 copies. The rosters are put in plastic bags and notebooks 2 weeks ahead of time. There's no need for addendums. Provisional ballots would decrease by 83%. The correct ballot will be issued for any voter, including one who has an address change. End of election audits and reporting. It'll lessen the burden on election staff who already experience unprecedented levels of job fatigue. Election results would be available faster. Up-to-the-minute automatic election day tear sheets, which used to be called poll lists, will be available for press and political parties.
The Elections Department has identified 100 vote center locations.
The physical requirements that we look for in a vote center are facilities available for extended hours with 2,000 square feet, 75 to 80 regular parking spaces, and 5 to 10 disabled spaces. Easy access from the road, ADA compliant for accessibility, proximity to public transportation, restrooms available, a poll worker break area, and 6 outlets minimum in the room. The accessibility requirements we looked at are proximities to communities with historically low vote-by-mail usage, proximity to population centers, proximity to language minority communities, proximity to voters with disabilities, proximity to communities with low rates of household vehicle ownership, proximity to low-income communities, proximity to a geographically isolated populations, including Native American reservations. There have been no changes in these locations, and accessible and free parking. A special note, no changes were made in geographically isolated areas. 2020 locations for those areas will be the same in the vote center model.
TENX certifications. Precinct Central has certified by National Testing Systems, NTS, and SLI compliance. Multiple attacks were simulated and TENX adequately prevented them, as well as simulated malicious attacks from poll workers. It also meets American with Disability Act ADA compliance. You have the one-page 10X security sheet in your supplemental packet. 10X is an industry leader in e-poll book and election management technology.
10X security of data. The server runs on Amazon Web Service AWS platform. The database can only be accessed within 10X infrastructure, only accessed with unique encryption communication between our poll pads and the database. The database is removed after elections. 10X was the only provider of e-poll books with a unique instance of our file secured in the clouds that only we can access. 10X had 0 cloud outages in 2020.
10X pollbook security features. All iPad units must be registered with 10X software to connect. There are no external ports or access to applications besides the 10X pollbook application. And Find My iPad provides robust framework for finding lost or stolen iPads and allows for remote locking or erasing of the device in the event of an emergency. The poll pads are transported in a hard case, and multiple iPads will be available at each site with spares available if needed.
10X by the numbers. 10X is in 18 states, serving over 300 jurisdictions. More than 45 million voters have used this technology.
We do realize there are challenges with the vote center model. And this is how we plan to address them. So the challenge in the change in tradition, the civic experience of voting with neighbors at a local school, church, or other polling places changed. We plan to provide education for the public, robust advertising, a website modeled after the Pima County Vote Safe Initiative in 2020, outreach to community organizations. In regards to connectivity, the use of Vote Center relies on technology having up-to-the-minute connectivity. So we are currently testing in rural areas, and we are boosting on election day with Verizon or another carrier and using Cradlepoint units that the Sheriff's Department currently uses when they're out in the field. And we also have additional contingency plans. For voter convenience, the loss of neighborhood voting locations will require some voters to travel to get to a vote center. We've maintained the same voting locations for geographically remote areas. Voters will be able to access any one of the 100 vote centers in Pima County. So rather than having only one location where they can vote, they actually will now have 100.
In conclusion, we've been working to implement the vote center model since February of 2021. This is the perfect time to launch vote centers in preparation for the 24 presidential election. If we don't take advantage of this opportunity, we'll stay behind the technology. Our next opportunity won't be until 2026. We hope that now that you've seen all the data that you will support the vote center model. Thank you for your time.
And now we will open up for any questions.
Mary.
So the manual voting process now, we have the ID clerk and the signature roster clerk. We have two people putting a set of eyes on identification. Now we just have one person that's just going to scan it, and I don't know, is there an override if the ID doesn't match perfectly? And they have to be registered 29 days where they domicile. So if they've changed their driver's license, and is this automatically going to update they don't have the right to vote in that precinct on that particular day because they weren't registered 29 days before. A lot of questions. 40 precincts with greater than 90% voter turnout in the last election. That's an anomaly I've never seen in the 30 years I've been doing this. Just a lot of questions. The inspector and the board do not allow stuffing the ballot box. If the people, after we've locked up the ballots and other ballots show up in a polling place, that means elections department personnel had access to those because they come back and pick them up later. So, I mean, there's a lot of questions as we went along in this that having human contact, having people who know who live in the precinct, or I went to your funeral last week, why are you showing up to vote here? There are a lot of problems with this system. Just my opinion.
Mary or Gabby?
We aren't saying that the inspectors are stuffing the ballot box now, but we are saying that that possibility can't happen. We are saying that one person is going to be looking at the ID, but they're checking against the actual registration. If it doesn't match, we'll either change their registration to update their address, or they will vote a provisional ballot. Not much is changing other than not having to find their name in a signature roster.
Mary, Gabby, I've got a question. I think one of the concerns that people have deals with the fiasco that we had in Maricopa County in 2016. Going from 240 polling locations to 100, I know their drop was, I believe they had 60 vote centers.
Yeah.
And obviously considerably more precinct polling locations before that to start. How do we arrive at the decision that 100 vote centers is adequate to handle the election day voting from 240 precincts?
We actually have 125 during the presidential preference elections, and we have never had issues with that few. If we need to add a few more vote centers, I don't think that will be a problem, but we thought 100 would adequately serve the population. But we are flexible with that number. That's just what we've developed so far.
And I guess looking at the PPE with 125 vote centers, considering that approximately a third of the population is not eligible to vote in that election, you actually have fewer registered voters eligible to participate in more vote centers. So I guess from a technology perspective and the acquisition of equipment, how easy is it to flex up if we purchase enough equipment to handle somewhere between 100 and 125 vote centers and find out that we really needed 150 or 175? What kind of response time do we need and funding do we need in order to make that kind of a plus up possible?
We would probably, if we went to 150, we'd probably have to buy 25 precinct worth more. So I'm not sure how quickly we could do that, but I don't think we would have a problem doing that between the primary and the general.
But part of the reason that the locations are, that we're looking for locations that are at least 2,000 square feet is to accommodate for the increase in volume. And so if we think about, let's say 5 voters walking in and needing to check in, that normally takes about 3 minutes. So 3 times 5, that's 15 minutes for 5 people to get checked in. If there are 5 people and they're checking in via the e-poll book system, that is 30 seconds for 5 people. So that is 2.5 minutes to get the same number of people to go through that line. And so the volume capability is so much more efficient and can accommodate for larger numbers of people coming in to that polling location.
I'd also like to point out that during the presidential preference, even though a third of the voters aren't able to vote, that doesn't mean they didn't show up to vote. Because a lot of them don't understand.
Mary Preble?
So last time we were talking about how it's hard for people to have to get on the bus and travel to their voting locations. But now we're going to have to travel further for people to get to their voting centers. So How is that helping the electorate who are used to walking down to their elementary school and voting? I don't get that.
Thank you for that. So we've actually been paying very close attention to that. So the vote centers, we have them on bus routes in particular. We wanted to make sure that there are sidewalks available for people walking. And although polling locations might be fewer, they're more centrally located to accommodate for more folks. So it might be just simply walking in the opposite direction that they're accustomed to. And so with the technology that we plan to implement, we will have this very easy to search online through multiple formats. They can actually look through it on social media or on our websites. They can call our offices. So we're going to be sending notifications to them to alert them of this change. But there should be very little change for many people. What we hear most often, and what we've seen throughout the state and even nationally, is that folks are often passing by polling locations on the way to their assigned polling locations. And that creates a lot of frustration. They're like, why can't I vote at the library? Why do I have to vote at the church? Where their neighbors are voting. And so sometimes this is actually a lot more frustrating, and it creates less of the turnaround for people. If people show up and they're registered to vote, they're going to be able to cast their ballot.
Yep. Mary, Preble. You must be muted, Mary. Can't hear you.
Okay, so when I voted in a city election and I voted at the wrong polling place, my vote was negated, even though the ballot had exactly the same stuff on it. So at that point, my vote did not count, even though there were no other candidates on my list in the precinct next door than the precinct where I resided. The other problem is running this on Amazon Web Services. I think nobody in this country will trust elections as long as Amazon is involved with it. So I really, this whole thing, this electronic and sweeping this stuff up under the rug faster. We're supposed to have checks and balances at the polling places, and it sounds like there won't be checks and balances anymore. And that's an uncomfortable place for me to be.
It's okay. Just let her talk. Just let her talk.
And just as an FYI, the City of Tucson elections are conducted by the City of Tucson, not by Pima County Recorder's Office or the Elections Department. Are there any other questions? I saw another hand up.
Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question, and just I understand Mary's concern about Amazon Web Services, but unfortunately the fact of the matter is AWS is the largest web infrastructure platform in the world. So I don't think there's going to be much hope of getting away from that. But that really isn't my question. My question, I'd just like to know a little bit about what the contingency plans are in the event of connectivity or power failure. And you can just go on it like just a high level. I don't need details because I think we're going to have to do this again when we have quorum. So thank you.
I think, well, for the first election, because we've never used it before, we will have some kind of paper signature roster available, but not at the polling place. We'll have it with troubleshooters. We may also have some pre-printed ballots just in case. Does that help?
And
Yes, thank you.
And in that regard, we do, and this is very common, we do have runners available if we're running into an issue and we're recognizing that there's an issue. Number one, this system actually alerts us of that. This system will actually alert us that, the iPads are running out of juice. They're running out of battery. And different things like that. And so there's a command central that makes that information available to us, where the connectivity or the disconnects are occurring. And so we would be able to respond to that, just like any other election day issue where people are running out to bring additional supplies.
We also are fortunate in a vote center environment that if one vote center goes down, you can always go to the one down the street. You're
Sure.
not required to stay at one spot.
Understood. And just a follow-on question, and this is just maybe because I have a little bit of background in IT. Will there be like dedicated IT teams, support teams on day of, or
Absolutely.
would that still be going through like the Pima County IT Service Center?
We would be going through the elections office, and then if we need support, we will have IT support ready. We'll also probably have 10X personnel here for the first few elections so that if there is an issue, they will know what to do as well.
So currently, the recorder's office and the elections department, the recorder's office, we have our own IT department within our office, and the elections department has their own IT here, and as well as working with the county IT. So we, and all three, actually, the recorder's office, the elections department, and the Pima County ITD have all been collaborating on this project together.
Yeah, and we have budgeted for 10X to be here for the primary and general of this year.
Very cool. It sounds like you have some vendor support as well as some coordination amongst the various IT resources. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
I have a question for the 2022 election, and I know we discussed this issue collaterally at prior meetings. As far as the purchase of electronic poll books are concerned, is there a plan to go to electronic poll books for the 2022 election, whether we're in a polling center or a vote center or a precinct polling location? Either way, are we looking at that change definitively, or is that something that's still in the works and may or may not happen?
We are hoping to have the 10X contract on the board agenda for February 15th. If we also we're hoping to have the vote center question on February 15th. If they approve 10X, but not the vote centers, then we will have e-poll books for 2022, but not in a vote. If they don't approve the vote center, it will just be an electronic poll book for most of the precincts.
So the difference is kind of the difference between having a basketball tournament and having basketballs. And so the e-poll books are the basketballs. They're the equipment that we need in order to have vote centers. We can still use that technology separately, but it really doesn't, it's not as beneficial. We're seeing, again, those high numbers of provisional ballots that we have the same number or higher number than Maricopa County, and they have a much larger jurisdiction. That is unacceptable. The Supreme Court decision to, what Mary was talking about, discarding wholly discarding an out-of-precinct ballot that she said literally was the same as the precinct next to her, and she had her ballot thrown out. That type of thing that is happening is disenfranchising voters. And so this technology makes it so that people who are eligible to vote can vote. And so we're hoping that we are able to move to vote center model, and particularly in those rural areas. As you know, I'm very invested in the Thonothan community. That is a place where polling locations are over an hour away from one another. And so someone who lives in Gowo'o, who drives home from cells after working a long day and shows up just before the polls are closing and finds out they're actually registered in a different location, they no longer have the time to drive to another vote center. So for some of our Pima County residents, this is critical for their participation.
Looking at the situation, I think I voted early. or voted by mail every election I've participated in as far back as I can remember. But having been involved in the electoral process, I live in a precinct where my polling location is outside the precinct because there's simply no place inside the precinct adequate to provide that service. And one of the things that I've noticed over the past decade is it's becoming increasingly difficult to get what we would term traditional locations that have served as polling centers in the past to continue, particularly schools,
Yes.
because election day is a school day. So you have a significant amount of traffic in the school, which for a number of reasons, schools are reluctant to tolerate anymore. Churches, it's kind of a 50-50 toss-up. Some of them are willing to let us rent the space for the day. Some of them are not. I've also noticed increasingly people that are not in my precinct are staffing my polling location just because we can't get anybody from our precinct to staff the polling locations. Not every precinct is as fortunate enough or as fortunate as Mary's precinct to have at least one person that's been there consistently over time. So, it's a nice feature to have, but it's something that I think is becoming increasingly rare. Security, yeah, there's always going to be a security issue, but if I were horribly concerned about that, I think I would have to find a job because my retirement funding would disappear because it's all electronic. We have significant stock holdings, and I don't believe I've ever seen a stock certificate, so wouldn't know how to get one if I had to. So it's a changing environment. I think as us older people die, this will become more accessible and acceptable. Kind of a grim way to look at it, but the larger number of people that do vote at polling places, I think, are the elderly. So it's technologically a challenge. I guess one of the questions I would have, I noticed there is a place for signature on the e-poll book. Is that done with a stylus or is that done with a finger?
It's done with a stylus.
Good. I mean, I'm not going to tell you it's perfect, but I can do a much better job with my signature with the stylus than I can with my finger.
And it's a very nice stylus.
It's actually specially designed with their technology, and it's patented, and it's got a very nice feel to it.
Okay. Any more questions for Mary Martinson or our county recorder? Hearing none, ladies, if you'd be kind enough to do this again next month.
Absolutely.
You had a dry run, or at least a partial dry run. I noticed that Barbara Tillman has joined us, so we now have a quorum, but we didn't when we began. So
She's been on time, Brian.
Yeah, she was here.
She put a thing in the chat when she first came in that she was having audio issues.
okay. But we do have a larger group that I hope can participate in this process. Which board meeting are you hoping to have these issues on the board agenda for?
February 15th.
Which is before we meet again that month.
That's correct.
Okay. I think my recommendation would be that you go through the presentation again, and the diligence that we as members of the commission should have. If we will know whether we're going to do nothing, e-poll books and polling places after that board meeting, I assume.
Yes.
They can defeat both. They can defeat one. My assumption would be if they defeat e-poll books, polling places go away because you don't have the technology to do vote centers go away because you don't have the technology to do vote centers without the e-poll books.
That's correct.
So they can defeat vote centers without defeating e-poll books, but they can't defeat e-poll books and do vote centers.
That's correct.
Correct.
Okay. That I would suggest would be the focus of our conversation next month, and hopefully we can get a few more members of the commission to show up. But if nobody has any more questions, thank you, ladies, for your time and your presentation, and we look forward to another robust discussion next month.
Okay.
Thank you very much for having us.
You're welcome. And Barbara, can you hear me? And if you can hear me, I can't hear you.
And
Barbara is putting notes in the chat.
she asked someone to call her and left her phone number in there.
Oh, there it is. We got to come up with a few hundred less different WebEx formats.
I was trying to find out if she's that call-in user number 2, because if so, then I can try unmuting that.
If you would, Sean, I'd appreciate it.
Hello?
Barbara,
Hello, am I
Barbara.
speaking now?
You're speaking now. We can hear you.
Great, thank you. I did have one question
Okay.
for the speakers. I like the way it's presented, and I like all the precautions that you are taking and so forth. I am concerned that there's no policy that says that if you are no longer the people in charge, that these policies have to continue. I would like to see, when you present this to the Board of Supervisors, that you ask them to set policies in a permanent way, in a legal way, so that they always have to make the vote centers convenient for the outlying areas, for parts of town where people don't have cars, that sort of thing, rather than have it dependent on the good intentions of the heads of both recorder and elections department.
We absolutely agree with you, Barbara, and we will share that with the Board of Supervisors when we make our presentation there.
I do also want to add, Barbara, that the Board of Supervisors is going to have to approve the vote centers for every election. So that's also there as maybe something that will alleviate those fears.
And I'm assuming you don't mean the concept of vote centers. You mean the physical location of the vote centers, similar to the way they have to approve the polling centers today.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. And I think we should have some general policy stated that in the future, vote centers should be located in places where people who don't have cars can easily get to them, that sort of thing. And that the other concern I have is that some vote centers in the Maricopa County situation were overloaded, for example, downtown at lunchtime. And so you need to make provisions for areas that are going to be heavily loaded at certain times of day.
Yeah,
Right.
that's actually one of the benefits of us being the last to pick up this technology. There are already tried and tested. We're already learning from all of the mistakes that have been occurring in the state of Arizona since 2012, when Yahweh first started implementing this technology. And so we have been in contact with the other recorders and elections directors throughout the state, ensuring that we are hearing their best practices and their suggestions for what we can do. So when we talk about a place that has a high volume, or known places that have high volumes, precincts where there's high volume, we can take a look at that and assign additional poll pads to be there. We can go from, instead of 2 poll pads to 3 or to 5, or whatever. The flexibility in that is that's part of the benefits of moving to this system.
We're also going to recommend to the Board of Supervisors that they have an equity study done of the vote centers to make sure that we haven't missed any group.
So we want to take a look at the data afterwards to see, where this is. And again, the reason that we're wanting to move forward in 2022 is so that in 2024, the next presidential election, which of course always has a much larger turnout, that we're fully prepared and we can respond to any of those adjustments and make those adjustments to benefit our voters.
Will the locations of the vote centers again be sent as proposals to the parties and disability community and all those groups as they are now for the polling places?
Yes.
I noticed that La Paz County was not on your list of counties that were not doing e-poll books and vote centers. Have you gotten any feedback from them? I mean, and the only reason I pick on La Paz County is the population density is, I think, 21 people per square mile. So it's large, rural. I don't believe there's any kind of a major metropolitan area in La Paz County. How do they find dealing with vote centers as opposed to polling locations?
I will ask the La Paz County Director to send us a letter or something stating how their county does with vote centers and how they feel about it. Would that work for you, Brian?
It's fine. I mean, I think Pima County's kind of unique in the fact that we have a massive metropolitan area in one half of the county and nobody in the other half of the county. Very, very sparse population to the west and very metropolitan population to the east. Maricopa County is significantly metropolitan over most of the county. But Greenlee County is another one but they have a few, I won't say large metropolitan areas. There's less than 10,000 people in all of Greenlee County, but they do have some significant population centers. But I think La Paz is uniquely rural.
I just want to stop you there, Brian, and remind you that the Bonhoeffer Nation is west, and there are people there.
I didn't say there were no people there, but the population density is significantly less than it is in downtown Tucson.
But that's not nobody. That's
No,
not nobody. And we absolutely, the recorder's office and the elections department together, recognize that there are people there. We are concerned about those voters, so we don't want to use language negating the fact that people exist in those locations. So
right.
I'm going to push back on that a little bit.
No, and I understand, but it is that part of the county is more like La Paz County than it is like Maricopa County.
Yes, and so we're paying special attention to those areas. We'll be testing equipment. We're boosting our signal to be able to respond to the needs, and places like Mount Lemmon or Hickwan or Pismo, where I'm from. All of those places we are taking the special care and doing our testing now and troubleshooting with. Like we said with Verizon, we're in contact with the Verizon company to talk about election day boosting of signal, just so that we can, have that, and then what is the contingency, and then going from, to a much more robust system like a Cradle Point. It's really going to make a big difference there. So.
Okay. Yeah. No, I just my left-handed comment was a way of saying I'd like to see some experience from a rural county as well as, I mean, we're very familiar with Maricopa's county fiasco in 2016. I'd like to know what someplace like Mojave County and not Mojave, La Paz, because Mojave doesn't do it. And Green Lake County is way underpopulated. So,
And in some of those counties, you have to travel a long distance to vote. In Cochise County, for example, you used to be able to vote in Portal, but now you have to drive, I think it's about 60 miles to Douglas to vote, to find a vote center. So I'm glad you're taking care of the people in remote areas. How many devices does that leave to have voting centers in the metropolitan area?
We would have one or two in that one. We're going to have 2 in the outlying areas and then 2 or 3 in the metropolitan area at each location.
I mean, how many locations?
Oh, it would be 75 in Metro Tucson.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry.
and Barbara, since you brought up Portal, if you indeed have to travel from Portal to Douglas in order to vote, you have to leave the state in order to get to a polling location.
You can't even drop off your ballot on election day without driving 60 miles.
So, okay, any other questions, issues, comments?
Well, we hope we've earned your support today as we move forward. And again, we're the last to adopt this technology. And so thank you again for allowing us to present.
You're welcome. Thank you for the presentation. And we will bombard you with questions next month. Okay, now that we have a quorum, we can take some action on some items on the agenda. And backing up, I did jump over call to the public since we didn't have a quorum. I don't believe we have anybody from the public on the line. Sean, am I correct in that assumption?
To my knowledge, yes. I don't believe there was anybody from the public. It was just going to be the other people that were observing. So unless you guys have anybody specifically that you would like to have unmuted, then just let me know.
Nobody that I know of that's requested to speak to the public. Okay, meeting summary approval. Anybody want to make a motion to approve the meeting summary as it was presented?
I'll move to approve the meeting summary.
Is there a second to that? I have a second.
Second?
Second from Mary and a second from Barbara. So we have a second and a third. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Raise your hand and wave.
Aye.
Okay, the meeting summary was approved. Election of officers. I know per the bylaws, we are supposed to elect officers the first meeting of the year, which would be this month. The fact that we are almost 50% of the members present short of voting, I would like to make, well, I can't make a motion. I would like to entertain a motion from somebody that we delay the election of officers until the February meeting.
I move we delay the auction until a February meeting.
Okay, I'll second it.
Mary seconds that. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Unanimously approved. Legislative review. Barbara, I don't know whether you heard that. What I'm looking for is somebody that's willing to take on the process of following bills as they move through the legislature. But that's not an action. It's not an actionable item. So we want to address that. We are now down to future agenda items. I would like to have the opportunity after finding out what the Board of Supervisors does at their February meeting, where we end up with the poll books and or vote centers and or polling locations, to have both the Recorder's Office and the Elections Department back to discuss issues and concerns that some of which were raised today and some of which we may develop between now and then. Anybody have a problem with having them back on the agenda again next month? Okay, Mary?
Can I ask a question? Will this take a change in the ARS Title 16 statutes to go to an electronic poll book and voting centers, which are not spelled out, I don't think, in the ARS 16?
I don't know, but since 11 of the 15 counties are already doing it, it would seem logical to assume that if it required a change, the change has been made, or somebody's assuming there's no change required.
Brian,
I see we still have
This is
the
Mary.
recorder in the elections department online, if you want to address that.
No, the statutes have been changed to allow this. In the presentation, we actually cited a statute that says the Board of Supervisors can go from polling places to vote centers. An electronic poll book is also in the statutes.
So basically what you're saying is the statute just gives the permission to the Board of Supervisors, that aspect of control over the election.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So before we vary too far from the agenda, again, any other, at this time, does anybody else have any suggestions or things they'd like to see on the agenda next month? Outside
This is
of,
Barbara.
yes,
I would
ma'am.
like an update on personnel. I understand that Mary is not with us will not be with us through the next election, and that at least one other election person has left. I would like to have a summary of what is happening with replacing personnel. What is the status of all that in both departments? I understand there's a vacancy in recorder too.
Okay. We'll get that on the agenda for next meeting. Our next meeting is scheduled for February 18th. Is that a problem for anybody? And March 18th, is that a problem for anybody? Maybe a problem for me. I don't know. I will have to check with the boss on that. That happens to be my 50th wedding anniversary, so I may not be available.
Good job, Brian.
That's so cool.
That's awesome, Brian.
Well, my 25th, I was in the desert in Saudi Arabia, so this one I might have to stick around for. Okay. Anything else that needs to come before the commission? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Is there a second?
I second.
Second and a third. Any objection? Hearing none, this meeting stands adjourned. We'll see you all in a month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So long.
Thank you.